Ready to go? بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وأسلم على من بعث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته everybody at home and welcome to another session of Ask an Imam where myself and Imam Osama we discuss some of the things that you are or that are pertinent to you and on your mind and you wish to ask us or just wish to discuss or for me and Imam Osama to discuss. A little disclaimer before we begin, this is by no means a place for your fatwa. So if you're looking for a fatwa from us, then you need to look elsewhere because we're not going to give it. But rather what we are going to do is, through our discussions inshallah, we're going to shed some light on the ahkam al-shar'iyya, the rulings and the law in Islam inshallah ta'ala. And hopefully through that there is some benefit to you at home. And inshallah, hopefully myself and Imam Osama can also benefit from our discussions bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. And as ever, if you like what you hear, and even if you don't like the video inshallah and subscribe to our channel for future updates inshallah ta'ala. So Sheikh, where should we begin? I mean, there's a few questions that came up last week that we didn't cover, and I think we promised everybody that we'd discuss it today inshallah, vis-a-vis la vaccine. So obviously this is a very pertinent subject, everybody's asking about it, and diverging opinions I must say that are out there with regards to whether you should take it or you shouldn't take it. But what we'd like to do, Sheikh, like when we're discussing it, is maybe approach it in a more structured way so that we can perhaps have a little bit more direction in the discussion inshallah. So the first way to approach it would be to discuss the permissibility and the impermissibility of taking a vaccine. And then from that will come the discussion of whether one should take the vaccine for COVID-19 or not inshallah. So the permissibility, is it permissible, is it impermissible, and what constitutes its permissibility? Are there any details with regards to like what constitutes a vaccine or a medicine for that matter to be impermissible and not permissible to take, even though it has medicinal purposes, right? So it benefits you medically. So inshallah, let's suppose start there, and hopefully we can shed some light on it inshallah.
Right, so Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursaleen, Nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Well, the first thing to say is that the teaching of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and I'm paraphrasing, but that for every illness Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created a cure and treatment. Some will get to know of it and others will not. That is left to the experts to research and find a cure and a treatment for every ailment. That is a promise of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So from the perspective of Sharia, we have, when we're talking about treatment, that is when there is actually an illness and you have to treat it, right? So as we know, the ahkam al-shar'iyya generally are something is either an obligation, a recommendation, a discouragement, or impermissible, right? So a fard or wajib, then you have a recommendation which is a sunnah, mustahab, all fall in that category. And then something that is discouraged, so it can be makruh. According to some scholars, there are different levels of makruh. There is makruh tanzihi, meaning slightly discouraged. There is makruh tahrimi, which is a makruh that is very close to haram. And then obviously haram. So everything in the life of the human being is sort of placed into this, what is the word I'm looking for?
Category.
Yes, one of these four categories. So in relation to treating yourself, the treatment can be, in general, ulama have debated whether if there is a cure if there is a medicine, if there is a treatment for an ailment, whether it is an obligation to take it or not, or is it a recommendation? So some see it as an obligation, and the basis is that Allah has given you life, it is a trust from Allah, and you are commanded to protect it, and because treating yourself will protect your life ultimately, then taking medication is an obligation, especially in cases where the ailment or the illness will most probably lead to death, right? Others say no, it is recommended, highly encouraged, because Rasulullah himself took measures to he treated his illnesses except for the last one, and this is why there is a debate, because in the time where Rasulullah was dying, he specifically commanded that no medicine should be administered to him, and some Sahaba disregarded that, and they gave him medicine, and this is a known story that they gave medicine to Rasulullah while he was perhaps not conscious, and he did not like that. So this is why there is a debate whether you have to take it, whether you should take it, or it is recommended for you to take. Medication will only be considered haram, I think, from what I know. Treatment and medication will only be considered haram if there is halal alternative, right? If there is no halal alternative, or the halal alternative is less effective, then the haram becomes halal due to necessity. So example of haram treatment would be getting treatment administered by, for example, for a male patient by a female practitioner, if there is a male practitioner available. This would be one example. It's something that is not directly related to the treatment. You can accommodate the need or the Sharia principle. Or if the medication or the treatment in itself contains haram substances, such as very common, we have alcohol in medication, gelatin in medication. In that case, so there is a difference of opinion amongst ulama, and obviously our madhab is kind of Imam Malik's madhab is probably the strictest on this, where he really says that if there is absolutely no alternative, then and a person's life is at risk, or they are at risk of losing a function of their body, then it would be permissible for them to take the haram substance, and it's basically the logic behind it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not create, He will not place the treatment, something beneficial, in something that is in a substance that is haram, and make it haram, right? But times have changed now, and we need to preserve medication and what have you, and because of that certain haram substances are being used. So in general, this is the general in relation to treating an illness. So we are talking about a person who has a condition and they have to treat it. Now in relation to preventative,
which is the vaccine and stuff, right? Yeah.
So when we are trying to prevent a harm, then we need to be a little more careful, I think, because there is still the dhann. Obviously there is a possibility of a person contracting a virus, a certain virus or an illness, but it's not for certain. So because of that, you won't immediately get the dispensation of anything that is haram becomes automatically halal. We just have to be careful about that. But I guess it's the same principle.
That if there's something haram found in any of these vaccines, then it would be, if there was no other alternative, then it would be permissible.
Yes.
If there was a degree of certainty of or likelihood of you contracting the virus, then it'll be permissible for you to take it if it was in that category. needless to say, that means that if the vaccine or the treatment or whatever it is that you're getting is free from any type of haram substance, any ingredient that is impermissible, then it will be under the realms of permissibility, right?
Absolutely.
Outright.
It would be recommended for yourself and for protecting others.
Yeah.
Highly recommended. Whether it can ever be an obligation, I doubt that very much. Right? Sharia would not compel you to sort of take a preventative measure to protect yourself. I don't know whether that would, but it will be highly recommended if it is for certain, if it contains something that is impermissible, then it is for ulama to tell us when there is a need and
So right now, as people who sort of are versed in fiqh or have studied fiqh, that's kind of the perspective that we're going to be looking at this particular issue, right? So right now we know that there are a number of vaccines that are out there now. So we have the Pfizer or the Pfizer, however that's pronounced in whatever language, I have no idea. Right? So was it a silent P? I don't know. Right. So we have that vaccine, then we have the Moderna vaccine, then we have that one coming out from Oxford, right? We know for certain that the Pfizer, I'm just going to call it. I'm going to call it that for facetious reasons. We know that doesn't have any haram substances that we know of. The Moderna vaccine doesn't have any haram substances. The Oxford vaccine might have the porcine gelatin of some sort, or some sort of gelatin in it, that may render it questionable with regards to the other two. So in this sort of situation, we have alternatives, right? So we have one that potentially has some haram substances, and we said that the hukum or the mas'ala is that if you have a treatment or a vaccine that you're going to take that has haram substances, if there's no alternative, then that becomes permissible, right? If there's no haram substances, it's obviously permissible. But if there is haram substances, only in situations where there is no alternative does that become permissible.
And obviously, if it is an extreme necessity.
And there's a necessity, yeah.
So we know that, for example, we discouraged people, or we in our khutab we spoke about the flu vaccine that was given to students in school, which contained pork gelatin.
Yeah, pork gelatin. Yeah.
And we said that would be haram because contracting a flu is not like contracting COVID. COVID-19. So there's a huge difference.
Subhanallah. That's an important principle as well to remember, isn't it? That the haram only ever becomes permissible not in and of itself, but because of an external factor, and that is a necessity that arises.
Protecting life.
So now that you have these alternatives, that would mean that if one of these, if a person had a choice, right, between taking one of these vaccines, they would be obliged, if you like, to make the choice, not necessarily take it, but make the choice of one that contains halal ingredients as opposed to haram ingredients. Yeah.
But I don't think it's, realistically speaking, I don't think we are going to get a choice. When vaccines are
like one is going to be rolled out.
Whichever is available is going to be given to you. You're not really.
So in that situation, if the one that is rolled out in the UK has a haram substance or ingredient to it, and there's no other alternative, and there is a necessity, for example, that the virus is spreading and it's spreading really fast, and this is one of the ways in which to prevent that and abstain or stop the spread of it, then where would the ruling lie within the 5 categories of the Sharia?
It would be mubah, permissible.
Something that's permissible, yeah. So neither recommended nor disliked, or it's up to the person to take it.
Yeah. I think it'll just remain as mubah.
Yeah. With regards to so we have when it comes to there's talk of whether the vaccine is taken from fetal cells, or whether those things will actually change a person's DNA when you take them. there's not really any substantial evidence for these claims at this point in time, right? No one's ever come and like, this is the evidence for this claim.
It brings us to the real crux of the problem, is that people are accepting information from sources that are not reliable, and Allah very clearly says that يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم نادمين. That when you receive information from an unreliable source, here Allah says a fasiq, meaning a person who has no belief or very weak in their belief, then Allah Azza wa Jal is saying to be careful and to not to accept that information, readily accept that information. أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة, because by doing so you may harm a people unknowingly, and in this case you would be harming yourself, right? And then فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم نادمين, and then you will eventually regret the harm that you have caused yourself or you have caused somebody else because of information that was not verified. So I think this is where really the problem is, and our community is just like other communities, apprehensive perhaps about well, from the beginning, right? We had things about the COVID-19 and conspiracy theories and what have you, and now the vaccine. So it's for a person to do their research. Yes, you should not rely on somebody else making a decision for you. You should make a decision, an informed decision yourself. But know that a lot of information that is peddled out there is mere hora. Right?
It's hearsay. It's just like a myth.
Absolutely. And you get a video of some person speaking. You don't know who they are.
And that spreads like wildfire. WhatsApp being forwarded everywhere and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Videos of people taking a vaccine and dropping.
Yeah.
Allahu alam. I'm not. What I'm trying to put in people's minds is that you need to verify the information that you have. That is absolutely essential. We should not be a gullible community that anything that is passed around we just believe. Now somebody will say, well, how can we trust the information that is coming from the government and what have you? It's the same. They are as fasiq as everybody else, but they are in a position of authority. So if you were to take the information that the government is putting out, then you will not be held responsible before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you have taken something unverified, information that is unverified. So these people, although disbelievers, but we hope that they will do their best. They have they can finance the research. They have the people to do the research, and it's about their lives as much as it is about ours. So we put our trust in Allah Azza wa Jal, obviously, but we make sure that the information that we are making, we are basing our decision on, is verified and reliable. And then we have Muslim doctors, alhamdulillah, that can give us information and what have you. And I would say, if you need to make a decision for yourself, then you need to, and alhamdulillah, as a Muslim community, we all have contacts with people that are perhaps working for the NHS, doctors and what have you. And we really need to, they are the experts in these fields, and we need to ask them the question and take the answers that are provided, and not become our own self-made scientist and researcher and what have you. And we have this problem. We have this problem in Sharia. So we're going to have
Google, man. We just go on Google, ask him a question, and come up with a
fatwa. They make their own decision, and they interpret verses in their own way and ahadith in their own way. And Allah Azza wa Jal says, "Fas'alu ahla dhikri in kuntum la ta'lamun." You need to ask the people who are specialized in a certain area, if you do not have knowledge of it, and it's not as simple as, like you said, you know, a WhatsApp video or a YouTube video or a Google search. But you don't have, at the same time, you have to say that there are strong voices, perhaps not many, but strong voices of experts that are warning about. They're not saying don't take the vaccine. They're saying we don't know yet because the trials have not, you know, the animal trials have been skipped and what have you. And those are, in my opinion, they're legitimate concerns. And this is why you cannot say that taking the vaccine is recommended or an obligation, because it is too early to make that decision. We can say whether it is permissible or not, and we have determined that it is permissible. So, Allahu Alam.
SubhanAllah. So there's a lot of talk about side effects as well. To be fair, side effects.
It's going to take time before we get to know of any side effects.
Yeah, even if there are, though, they're quite sort of, there's side effects in every medicine that you take, and they're all listed as well. In if you take out that little pamphlet, you know, in a what's it called, in a little box of like tablets that you get from the pharmacy, and it'll tell you the list of side effects that you can possibly get from that. There has to be like an understanding of, just because there is a side effect to something doesn't necessarily render that thing impermissible, that you shouldn't take it anymore. You have to look at a sort of there's a balance between the risk involved of getting one of those side effects and the benefit. And so the risk-benefit analysis. So if the risk is negligible and it's tiny and it's out of, like, you know, 100,000, maybe, you know, one will get it or something like that, then that's something that's negligible. That's something that is, whilst it's there and we recognize it, it's not something that takes the overarching sort of focus of the hukum. So you deem it impermissible just because one person is likely to, or possible to get this, or a group of people are possible to get this. So there's the same thing with the vaccine. If it's a small sort of percentage of side effects that are possible to take place, then.
And the amazing thing, Sheikh, it's really about information and what is being passed around, because people take paracetamols and ibuprofen like, you know, like Smarties, never considering so the person who takes medication all the time with so many side effects has never questioned any of those medications. But because there is this sort of, you know, craze, and people are just sitting at home and information is being passed around, and obviously people are concerned, you know, all of a sudden everybody has become an expert, and I think it's the wrong approach. You know, that is not to say we are encouraging people to take the vaccines, but we definitely have to discourage people from accepting information from unreliable sources, because it does you no good, and it may cause harm to you and others. And obviously the threat to life is very real. You know, we are now we have a number of people from our community who have contracted the virus. We have a few of them who have passed away. We hear of people, I think at this point in time, it was a different thing altogether in March last year, when it was the start of the pandemic. We were not sure about it, but now everybody knows someone who has died. And yes, there is talk about, you know, how death certificates are being perhaps manipulated, and statistics. But Allah alam, you know, we are to make a decision on the zahir, on what is apparent, and we leave the rest to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we make an informed decision, and we rely on Allah azza wa jal with firm belief that neither the virus nor the vaccine have any benefit or harm of their own, right? Benefit and harm is in the control of Allah azza wa jal. Life and death is in the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is the belief of the Muslim.
There was a follow-up question on a comment made about the flu vaccine. I think it was had pork stuff in it, and you said mentioned it was haram, but there was a comment, someone mentioned that it's deadly for elderly people. So
the flu, yeah.
Would it still be haram for them?
So with the flu, the flu vaccine, the amazing thing is that there is an alternative. There is the actual jab. So for elderly people, the jab is available as an alternative. But for children, they were not giving so they were only giving the breathing sort of.
The oral
jab,
spray,
So there wasn't the injection.
But even if the flu jab for the elderly, and it's deadly for the elderly,
Yeah.
if it had pork,
Yes, it would be permissible, because then it's about preserving life.
Yeah, that was a question from Oakhampton.
Yeah.
So shout out for that little comment, mashallah. All right. So in summary, guys, it's quite a lengthy sort of conversation on this, pertinent obviously to the times that we're living in, and quite relevant. But just to summarize, inshallah, that the ruling of taking a vaccine that's related to COVID-19 is, if there is no haram substance in it, is deemed permissible. If there is a haram substance in it, then if there is no other alternative but that, and the threat is imminent, then it becomes permissible, not in and of itself, but because of the necessity of taking it and no alternative being found. Whether you want to take it or not is another question. Whether you should take it, should I say, is another question. And that doesn't come down necessarily to the Sharia, it comes down to the statistics, the guidelines, what Ahl al-Dhikr, what the doctors and the healthcare professionals, what they recommend and what they say, and also your own personal convictions, whether you wish to take it or you don't wish to take it. At this point in time, there's no obligation at the moment, inshallah. That could change obviously in the future, and if it does, then another topic of discussion, inshallah ta'ala.
Inshallah.
Let's move on to some of the questions that the brothers and sisters have put in the chat. I have heard that you can divorce your wife if she is not grateful, from the story of Ibrahim and Ismail and his wife. Does this also show that if your parents want you to divorce your wife, should you obey them? This is very interesting, subhanAllah. Yeah. Interesting sort of analogy and scenario as well. So if basically the concept is that if someone advises you or sees something that is not good in your spouse,
so
is that grounds for divorce?
The first thing, Sheikh, I think you shouldn't have mentioned the guy's name.
It's in the chat.
So his wife might be listening. Allahu Akbar. Okay, so this is a very good question, my brother. MashaAllah. Very good question. We know the story. Very quickly we'll go through it in a minute or two. That obviously Ismail alayhi salam grew up in Mecca. Allah Azza wa Jal commanded Ibrahim to leave Hajar and Ismail in Mecca and return to Palestine. So Ibrahim alayhi salam would visit on occasions with permission from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when he went to visit Ismail alayhi salam, he did not find him. He found his wife at home. So he asked about their condition, and she complained. She complained about that they were going through a difficult time and life was not good and what have you. So he said, give Ismail my salam and ask him to change his doorstep or something.
His gate,
his gate or his door or something close to that. I don't have the word, but it was a metaphor for changing his wife. So when Ismail alayhi salam returned, he asked if anybody had come, and they say that being a Nabi of Allah Azza wa Jal and a righteous person, he felt the presence or that his father had visited, because they leave an aura, and this is very, very true, and we find that in the stories of the Salihin. Anyway, when he asked, he said yes, an old man came, and this is what he said. He gave you salam, and this is what he said. So Ismail alayhi salam said to his wife that you need to go to your parents. You are divorced. My father has asked me to divorce you, and then he came to visit. At a later stage, he was married to somebody else, and when Ibrahim alayhi salam asked the question, the same question about their situation, living circumstances, and she said, Alhamdulillah, everything is good and what have you. So then Ibrahim alayhi salam said, give my salam to Ismail, and you know, a metaphor for make sure you hold on to your wife. So can we take a ruling from that? Absolutely not. We're not Ibrahim, right? We don't receive revelation. Just like you know, if you saw yourself sacrificing your son in your dream, you wouldn't do it. It would be haram for you to do it. This is Ibrahim alayhi salam through inspiration from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and meeting a person. So we can't deduct from this hadith that through a simple conversation he made the judgment on that person and asked his son to divorce his wife, but rather it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspiration. And ulama said the reason for that is that obviously Ismail and his wife were going to be the forefathers of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala selected the best people for the sort of lineage of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that woman may not have been an evil person per se, but not appropriate for that honor, or to be given that honor of being the you know, in the lineage of our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we would not take a ruling from that.
If though, in our time, someone is advised by someone that they love and they respect and they honor, someone who perhaps has some form of authority over them with regards to the decision making, comes and tells them, listen.
Yeah, and actually there's a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he said, وَلَا تَعُقَّنَّ وَالِدَيْكَ وَإِنْ أَمَرَاكَ أَن تَخْرُجَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ وَمَالِكَ. That do not disobey your parents even if they command you or order you to leave your family or your wealth. And here ulama actually say what Rasulullah is doing, he's emphasizing that your parents want what is good for you. So in generally your parents will not ask you to do something of that sort, to get rid of your entire wealth, unless there is some benefit to you in doing that, right? So from that, and if you look at fatwa online, this is a question that is asked often from ulama, that my mother is asking me to divorce my wife, my father is asking me to divorce ask for a divorce from my husband, and things of that sort. And ulama are very clear. They say you have to have respect for obviously your elders and your authority. However, it is Sharia that makes that decision whether you leave a person or you don't. And from that, you won't be considered disobedient if you asked for a reason. You know, for example, my mother asks me to divorce my wife, I ask for a reason, and if that reason is a Shar'i reason and there is no way around it, then perhaps even then it would not be an obligation to obey, right? And you know, we look at the example of Ibrahim telling Ismail alayhi salam, but we don't see the example that Asya radiallahu anha wa ardaha, the wife of Fir'aun, did not separate from him until she died. And the wife of Nuh alayhi salam, or one of his two wives, was an unbeliever, and Allah mentions it in the Quran. And the wife. So it's really for the individual to make that decision. It does not become Shar'i incumbent because somebody of authority, usually your parents or somebody you respect and love, have asked you to divorce, because it's, you know, for a husband, his responsibility goes to his wife before it goes to his parents. For a wife, her responsibility goes to her husband and her children before her parents. That is so you take, that is their view. You know, if they are asking you and they see that you are struggling and you are suffering and what have you, and they say, look, you know, we think that you should divorce, you need to really make a judgment in accordance to Sharia, right? Divorce will, I think, it will. You can never say that divorce becomes an obligation ever, right? Unless a person is really Yeah, it cannot become an obligation because your father or your mother are asking you to divorce. But keeping in mind that they have love for you and they care for you more than they do for their own selves, you have to take on their recommendation and think about it, ask for reasoning from a Shari'i perspective, and only act on that.
Yeah.
If a person was to divorce now, and this happens, the mother-in-law has problems with the daughter-in-law, and the son is caught in between, and he doesn't know what to do, and ultimately at times just divorces his wife. You will have, if you divorce your wife, if a person was to divorce his wife without making sure that it is absolutely necessary, and you may think to yourself that I am being obedient to my mother by divorcing my wife, or my father by divorcing, but you are actually doing injustice to your wife or to your husband if you ask him for a divorce, right? So obedience to your parents is important, but ultimately we know the statement that you cannot obey any of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when by obeying them you are going to transgress the limits set by Allah, and we already know that divorce is highly discouraged, and it is the most disliked halal in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if Allah discourages it, and your parents are asking you, then you need to look for the Shari'i reasoning,
to weigh it up.
You don't do injustice to yourself and to children involved, if there are children, and to your spouse.
Yeah, so it's inconceivable that a parent would want hardship for their child. So if it is recommended by the parents to separate from their spouse, it has to be taken with a pinch of salt. You look into the Shari'i reasons, you ask why, and so on and so forth, and there's no harm in doing so. If, however, it's being done for nefarious reasons, right, which isn't really conceivable, but is possible, right? So it could be possible that there is this element of jealousy between the mother-in-law and the wife, for example, or even members of the wife's family and the husband, whatever the situation is. If there are nefarious reasons, that's min bab awla, right? That's even more there's even more reason to disregard that particular opinion and not take it. So it's not a blanket just because your parents are saying something that you have to do it.
Absolutely. And from this platform, I would say we need to ask parents not to get involved in their children's. The problem that we have is that we have a generation that came from a total different lifestyle, and you have a generation that was born here, educated here,
absolutely,
right? So there's huge gaps and huge differences in the way we lead our lives. So a parent, they have the right to recommend something if they think that is the way forward. However, parents do not have the right to use that authority to then blackmail their children,
emotionally, right?
And you hear this, unfortunately, that if you don't divorce him, then you are no longer my son.
Subhanallah.
Allahu Akbar.
What a choice to make. What a choice to make, subhanallah.
Yeah, and it's absolute nonsense, and that is abusing of your authority, right? Or another common, which we have young people who are wanting to get married, and parents stepping in because of culture or tradition or what have you, and they will step in and say, one very important thing is that don't make a threat if you know that threat is not going to work, right? It's absolutely,
playing with fire.
Don't say to your wife, if you go to so and so's house, you are divorced. If you know that she is going to do it, you know the nature of your wife, you know the nature of your husband, you know the nature of your children. If they are stubborn and they are going to do what they want to do, then don't make that threat, because if anything, it takes away your authority, right? because now you've just given them a reason
it's in their hands now,
disregard you completely.
I have the power now.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go now.
Yeah. So this is something that people did before and people said before, and because of the respect that the younger generation had for the elder generation. Like I think to myself, if my father was to say to me, if you do this, then you're no longer my son, I will absolutely not do it. Unless it is like a Shari'i obligation to do it, I would not do it, right? Because you're raised in a different environment and what have you. But people who, today they don't have that same,
it's very
same
that's a really good point, Sheikh,
and respect. So don't go around threatening.
I wouldn't say I wouldn't say it's the same amount of respect or attachment. I think the children still respect their parents and still love them, but I think that relationship, the dynamics of the relationship has changed a lot today than it was before. Back in the day, the society was a lot different as well. So you mentioned in your Friday bayan about the family being the nucleus, and that's what society basically revolved around. Society now here, especially here in the West, they revolve around the individual. The individual makes the decision. So even like a parent bringing up their child, they're sort of like, they raise them in a way that they make their own decisions, and they are mature enough and responsible enough to make those decisions and bear the consequences of those decisions. That's the kind of mindset that your children are raised with, and with that comes a level of expectation with regards to the lack of interference from others in your own personal affairs. So even you as a parent, if you want to be involved in your child's affairs, there's a line that you're not allowed to cross. Not because you're the parent and this is what the Sharia obligates. No, there is no line with the Sharia, right? But that line is put in place in our culture now because of that individualistic mentality that we have, with us, and that we're raised with. That causes, whilst that's a reality, and there's nothing particularly wrong with that reality, as long as you abide by however you want to interact with each other. But there are certain obstacles that come about as a result of that. So now, like you're saying now, right? So Islam permits me as a father, for example, to tell my son to do this and to do that and to do this with his wealth and not do that with his wealth and that sort of thing, right? And he has to listen to me. In the Sharia, he has to listen to me, and technically he'll be committing a sin if he doesn't, right? So that puts you in a really a difficult position. If you have the mindset of whatever I say goes and I make my own decisions and no one can tell me what to do, right? To then reconciling that with the Islamic perspective of the family being the nucleus of society, everything revolving around a family, and if everything does revolve around the family, then what affects the family positively and negatively has a big impact in the decisions that you make. But if it's individualistically, then only whatever affects you in your decisions. Forget whether other people are happy, whether they're sad, whether it hurts them, whether it doesn't hurt them, whether they encourage it, they don't encourage it, whether it goes with their principles or it goes against their principles. Whatever the case may be, that doesn't matter anymore. So that's a really difficult place to sort of to juggle, especially if you're trying to live a life based on the principles and teachings of the Prophet ﷺ. You're in sort of a lot of conflict with regards to not necessarily the ahkam of the Sharia, because it can be done individualistically, but it's very, very difficult because a lot of the deen is mu'amala, right? How you deal with and interact with others. And when that is severed because of individuality and the forces of what modernity are pushing, which is love conquers all, and whatever I am the agent of my own sort of decisions, and no one can influence my decisions. Otherwise, I have absolute free will to decide whatever I want to decide, even though you don't, because that's not the way the world works. It's never worked that way. But you know what I mean? So it's that. So navigating through that, I think that's a massive challenge, and I think that's what's happening now.
And if you want that sort of authority, mashallah, Sheikh Hamid, your child is still very small. If you want that sort of authority later on in their life, it's about educating them in that manner. The problem is when parents are absent in the education, and then the child is 25 years old.
They want to get married, and suddenly the Sharia comes into play.
That is inappropriate from a number of points. Is that you are going to make them, even if you are right in your decision, but because of your method and your approach, you are going to make that person, your child, disobedient to you. And because they are disobedient to you, they are going to suffer in this life before the next. So if you want that type of relationship where your children are going to come to you for decisions, ultimately take your considerations, take your views into consideration, then have that relationship with your children and educate them on those principles. And it is hope that inshallah when they grow older they will have that. But always think about, I think you need to think about the really the akhirah of your children. And we are not here, we are not defending and sort of having a go at parents and saying that children are allowed to do what they want to do, or
I'm definitely not advocating
like doing, right? That we say to children that you have a responsibility to and a loyalty to your parents. They are the cause for you coming into the world, and they have sacrificed for you, and you have to give preference to their wanting and over yours. That is a command from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the teaching of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He very clearly said to Sahabi, Anta wa maluka li abik. Somebody made a complaint to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that my father is has spent some of my wealth in a way that I don't agree with. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, you and your father and your wealth belong to your father, right? And that can never be taken away from parents. But what we are saying to parents is, think about not the immediate, don't think about your honor, and a lot of the time it's the nafs that comes into play. Think about the akhirah of your child, right? A very simple example is, you get young people who are wanting to get married. Now you can see, because of your life experience, you can see that they're not compatible, right? The woman that my son wants to marry is no good to him, because of culture, because of education, because of background, because she's not practicing, and so on and so forth. So what do I do as a parent? I try to have that conversation. I try to explain and try to answer all of the questions that my son will have. However, if he stays firm on his want, then I've got to allow that in order to protect him from a greater harm, which is that he's going to disregard what I say and perhaps continue a relationship with this woman and commit haram, and this will be a cause of dishonor for me in this life, and in akhirah he will be punished. So ultimately, if I am trying to preserve my son from haram, then I will not say no for trivial reasons, or even I guess parents wouldn't do that, but I would really keep things into perspective, mainly akhirah, and whether what I am enjoining upon my child, my son or daughter, whether they are going to accept it or not, whether they are going to act on it or not. And we deal with this, and if you look online, there are questions of this sort. Children disregarding their parents completely, and just going and getting married because they feel that they are not being heard. That is not to say that children are making the right decision. Absolutely not. And anybody who comes to me for advice in this situation, I always say that if you want blessing in your marriage, then you need to go with what your parents are asking you, even if you don't understand it, because automatically Allah Azza wa Jal will put blessing in that decision, right? But at the same time, it's important, and unfortunately we don't get the opportunity to speak about these matters sometimes in a khutbah or so. So it is good in a question
mashallah, well done
discussion
for bringing it up, brother,
to say that we have to be careful. And
okay, there was a question just there that I read just now, but it's been removed. Just missed it. It was the next
maybe it was answered.
There's a few quick questions, I think.
Yeah. So one is asking, I have missed fasting days years ago during pregnancy. How can I calculate them and how to return them? So what does a person do when they miss the fasts of Ramadan? Ramadan, I'm assuming, because you don't really have to make up any other fast, apart from your andhar, which I don't think that's what she's asking. So what does a person do? They've been pregnant, they missed some fasts, they don't really know now, I'm guessing time has gone by, how many days that they were, or maybe over the course of 2 years, 3 years, in terms of like sort of
the safest for the sister is to assume that she missed an entire Ramadan,
Mm.
right? Or to redo a number that takes the doubt away. So, you know, if she thinks that by making up, most likely it was, you know, under 10, then fast 10 days. If she feels that it was under 20 days, then fast 20 days.
So round up.
Yeah, round up, yeah. And if she's totally unsure and she has, so it's best to fast
Fast the entire month.
an entire month. You don't have to do it consecutively. You know, fast 1 day a week, perhaps 2 days a week, a Monday and a Thursday, and maybe it will get you into the habit of fasting the Sunnah days. So yeah, but try to do it in a way where doubt is removed, because this is now a responsibility on your shoulders, and you have to fulfill that.
Yeah, that's what it comes down to, isn't it? Just getting that level of conviction. As long as you're sure that you've covered, even if it's more, but as long as there is some doubt, then, you know, add some fast to it. Wicked.
And obviously there is the option of feeding instead of fasting. So if a person has difficulty fasting because of, you know, a condition or just, you know, general weakness, then there's the option of feeding poor people, one poor person a meal, and generally on Islamic charity websites you will find, you know, what is known as fidya. So that is also an option, but Allah Azza wa Jalla says وَأَن تَصُومُوا خَيْرٌ لَكُمْ. It is better to fast and to make up the fast, and so that we don't go into a discussion of the differences of opinion about whether you know, fasting and feeding is optional, or whether if you can't do one you have to do the other. Without going into that, it's best to actually fast and make up those days, inshallah.
MashaAllah. Another question is, how many sheep do we need to sacrifice for a boy's Aqeeqah? Here we go.
If the Imams are attending, then you need 2.
One for each.
Yeah, so for a boy and a girl, the sunnah is 1, right? And then it is recommended that for the boy you have an additional one. So 2 for the boy and 1 for the daughter, the girl. The reason for this is, and this is very important, it is not because you are you know, a boy is a greater blessing from
favor
Allah
the boy, it's favoritism,
or Sharia favors the boy. Absolutely not, right? If anything, girls are actually a greater blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
You get Jannah with girls than you don't get it with boys,
because
right?
Rasulullah sallallahu said that, you know, the person who has 3 daughters and educates them, takes care of their needs until they get married, they will enter paradise. And then somebody asked, they said, Ya Rasulullah, how about if one has 2 daughters? He said, Jannah is wajib for that person also. And somebody asked about 1, or the Rawi says that if Rasulullah was asked about 1, then he would have said the same. Why? Because the you know, the education that emphasizes the importance that, you know, the girl will become a woman, who will become a mother, who will become you know, the educator of a generation. So it's, but rather the reason is that a daughter from a financial perspective is perhaps a greater burden than a son. So the son is, you know, they're a blessing as a child, but when they will grow older, they will financially support and help the parent, and this is why the father is asked to sacrifice 2, perhaps. Maybe that was the back in the day hikmah, but I think now with a lot of man babies, you've got like 30-year-old kids still at home playing PlayStation,
playing PlayStation all day, right? Fortnite for I don't know how long. I don't know what the new craze is, but subhanallah.
But that is the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That for his boys he sacrificed 2, and for his girls he sacrificed 1. If a person from a financial perspective they are not able to do 2, then by doing 1 it's enough.
Inshallah. And you can do that. You don't have to do that necessarily in your locality. You can do that.
You can
in
do
any
it
location. Because I know that, you know, if you go to like Indo-Pak and stuff like that, and you pay to get it sacrificed there, it's a lot cheaper than doing it here or doing it in other countries. There's loads of options there for you guys. no, don't want to go into any side discussion, but it's really interesting to see that concept of equality that is kind of being shoved down our throats here, in the 21st century. It's very subjective in the way, in its application and the way it's used. And if you were to look at that situation as an example in isolation, that the Prophet ﷺ used to slaughter 2 sheep for boys and 1 for the girls. It's like, astaghfirullah, where's the equality between the genders, brother? Look at you guys. And you flip that around and you look at the akhirah, and there is no mention of if you raise 3 boys or 2 boys upon the deen, you get Jannah, right? It's like, where's the equality there, right? So it's very subjective and selective with regards to its application of that equality. And the deen of Islam doesn't work like that. It doesn't work on just because one particular gender has a certain responsibility or has a certain, there is a certain causality to an action, then that is somehow putting down the other gender, right? Because there are things that pertain to females that males have absolutely no regard in whatsoever.
One of those
and
things
vice versa.
that we were speaking about yesterday, Sheikh, is the obedience of the wife to her husband, right? And we find Muslims who are affected by the calls for equality and what have you. And sort of they start to make apologies for things in our Sharia, and they're trying to circumvent things and look at it from a different perspective. And it's very simple. A family unit, Rasulullah ﷺ has said that if there are 3 people and they do not make an authority amongst them, then shaitan is their authority. Right? So whenever 3 people, let's say for example, we are 3 friends and we are traveling, by sunnah we have to appoint an emir. Right? This is just for a short time.
Journey.
Why? Because it's 3 minds, 3 different ways of living. Somebody has to make the decisions. If somebody is not making decisions, then shaitan is going to play with everybody's minds. Right? And because of that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it that men are the authority in the family. So a woman has to obey her husband, just like children have to obey their mother, right? If you don't agree as a woman, you don't agree that you have, Allah Azza wa Jal has made obedience an obligation, that you have to obey your husband. You don't agree with that, then how do you then say that your children have to obey you? Right? And that is the notion outside today in society, that you have no authority above you except for state authority, right? You don't have to obey anyone, you do as you please, right? So if we can't pick and choose, right? This is number 1. And number 2, just because Allah has made obedience compulsory on the wife, it doesn't mean that the husband has now some sort of
absolute authority to say what he wants.
No, if you think about it from the worldly perspective, yes, it will be a great injustice. But even then, it actually, like I said, it's a unit, a number of people. There has to be a decision maker. You don't go to a company and establish a company and say, well, we have no director because we want to all be equal. You have to have somebody in place that makes the decision. That is how the world works. But if you include akhirah in it, that Rasulullah ﷺ is dying and he is saying what? As-salah wa ma malakat aymanukum. So he's reminding men of their responsibility to their wives, right? And that you are going to be judged by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Rasulullah ﷺ says, anybody who is given a position of authority, it will be a cause of humiliation on the day of Qiyamah. Meaning that a person should not seek authority, but if it's given to you and you don't fulfill its responsibilities, then you are going to be questioned by Allah. So it has to be put into context, as Imam Hamid said, and not cut things out and then start to raise questions about the way of Sharia. And this comes from these questions, like I say, you can ask any question you want, right? That doesn't put your iman in danger. Just don't expect that you will understand the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ultimately, we do something because Allah commands it. Whether you know if it's beneficial or harmful for you, doesn't matter, right? You do as Allah commands, right? If you only do as Allah commands when you understand it, then you really are only doing what you please, right? You're relying on your own mind and your own experience and your own knowledge to make a decision for yourself, and it just happens that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what He commanded goes in agreement with what you say, right? So you are worshipping yourself and not Allah Azza wa Jal. There's no harm in seeking to understand the wisdom behind things, because that will strengthen your iman, that you will see that Allah only commands that which is beneficial for me. Never will He command something that is harmful for me, right? And yes, sometimes, you know, in situations, for example, a very common one, that sisters find themselves in very difficult situation, and they say, look, why is it that only the husband has the right to divorce? I'm suffering, for example, physical abuse, emotional abuse, and I can't do anything about it. I'm stuck by this Sharia. I'm separated from my husband for a year. He doesn't care for me. He doesn't look after me, not after our children, and yet I am still under this man. As I can't give you the answer for that, right? Sharia has put in place that usually you would have a qadi and a person of religious authority who will look into your case and sort of dissolve the marriage, but that is not available here, or it takes a long time to process with the Sharia councils and the advice and what have you, but that is not a fault of Sharia, but rather of how we manage things as a Muslim community. And it's very dangerous, because if you listen to these thoughts of shaitan, and I remember I had a sister a few months ago who said to me, my iman is really at the end of the road. I feel like I'm almost going to become a disbeliever because I cannot understand it. And that is a trick of shaitan, right? Always Islam is to submit. That, Ya Allah, whatever you have commanded, I submit to it. Whether you're going to do it or not, that is your own personal choice, and Allah will hold you to account for it. If you cannot do something, then at least have in your heart, say, Ya Allah, I know this is your command, but out of weakness I'm not able to uphold this command. That is a far better position than starting to question so what is the wisdom in this, Ya Allah? Or what is the wisdom in out of anger? And because you are in your situation, you are only thinking about your own personal case. And Sharia does not deal with individual situations, right? It's blanket rulings for the benefit of everyone, right? And if you cannot see benefit in the command of Sharia or in the legislation of Sharia, it is because either you are not implementing Sharia as it should be implemented, or you have lack of knowledge and wisdom and vision. So you are only thinking about things now, you are not thinking about the future, and especially you're not thinking about akhirah.
One other question is that can I adopt a Muslim child if I am not a Muslim? So can a Muslim adopt a non-Muslim, and can a non-Muslim adopt a Muslim?
Okay, so the first thing is, we don't actually have adoption in Islam, right, Sheikh? In the sense that the child takes your name and what have you. Allah Azza wa Jal very clearly says, "Ud'uhum li'abaihim huwa aqsatu 'inda Allah," right? And the example, living example, is that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had Zayd radiallahu anhu as an adopted son. He was known as Zayd, the son of Muhammad. But when this verse was revealed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically commanded Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to give Zayd the name of his father. If the father, obviously, if the parents are known. If they are not known, then it's a different matter altogether. And it's amazing that Zayd, Sheikh Sha'rawi mentions this. He says Zayd radiallahu anhu is the only Sahabi that is mentioned by name in the Quran.
In the Quran, yeah.
Right? And the reason for it, look, Abu Bakr is a greater Sahabi than Zayd, but he wasn't mentioned by name.
فَلَمَّا قَضَى زَيْدٌ مِنْهَا وَطَرًا.
And it's only one specific place where Allah mentions. And they say, Sheikh Sha'rawi says, that the wisdom behind it is that Zayd was known as Zayd, the son of Muhammad. This was a great honor for him, especially when Rasulullah became the messenger. And then Allah revealed verses to take this away from him. You're no longer Zayd, son of Muhammad. You're just Zayd, son of is it
Thabit,
Thabit
yeah.
radiallahu anh. I think his father later became Muslim. But anyway, Zayd, son of Thabit. Now you know that honor was taken away from you. So Allah replaced it with what? By mentioning the name of Zayd radiallahu anhu in the Quran, and his name is mentioned until the day of Qiyamah. It's actually a worship to read the name of Zayd, you know, in order. So it shows you the hikmah of Allah Azza wa Jal is beyond human. You know, the justice in that. It's justice and beyond.
That's beautiful.
Right?
Yeah, that's beautiful. MashaAllah.
But yeah, answering the question. So there is no adoption of that sort, meaning that you can take care of a child. It is a very praiseworthy, a great deed, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala. However, that child, when they become of age, you know, the ahkam of hijab and what have you will come into place, right? Which means that you know, effectively, if that child is a girl, then you know there will be the ahkam of Sharia would be implemented with their you know the members of the family in which they have grown. To say whether a Muslim child can be raised by a non-Muslim, it would be highly discouraged unless the non-Muslim is able to sort of, just because they would not be able to give them the education that they need, right? And the principles that they need for their lives. It will be extremely difficult for a non-Muslim to do that. Is it impermissible? I don't think so. But it will be discouraged because you know you wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, there's nothing really to indicate in the Sharia its impermissibility.
No,
you have
absolutely
people
not.
who, although it's a different circumstance, reverts coming to Islam, they are Muslims, they have non-Muslim parents. Some of them even young, in their early teenage years, they become Muslim at school or whatever. So they're not exactly getting that upbringing either. So it's kind of a little bit similar in that sense. But so there's nothing explicit just to say no, like inheritance, for example. There's explicit ruling that non-Muslims don't inherit from Muslims, Muslims don't inherit from non-Muslims. But here in this situation there isn't anything explicit. So when there's nothing explicit, there is the hukum comes from a different area, which is you know, the Islamic education, whether that can be provided or not. If those things can be fulfilled, then
absolutely there is scope for it, and actually it will be praiseworthy. And we will say, even from a Shari'i perspective, that non-Muslim who takes on this sort of child and takes care of them, it may be a means of their guidance or their salvation, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala.
Right, let's get through one or two more questions, inshallah, just before we wrap things up.
Did we deal with a Muslim raising a non-Muslim child?
No, I don't think we touched on that. No.
So the same thing here. That it is obviously permissible. There is nothing in Sharia that says you are not permitted to do so.
And then la ikraha fi din, right? So it's not like evangelism on the child and
you can't compel them. No, absolutely not. But you will seek to explain to them, because obviously as a Muslim you know that the most important thing in your life is your faith. Right? And your belief, and it's going to be a key for you to enter paradise eternally, and you want what is best for mankind, and that is if there is a drive for da'wah and calling people to Islam, that is it. You know, not seeking to increase numbers, but rather, you know, when you truly believe that what you have is going to be a means of blessings in this world and in the next, to sort of deprive people that you love of it is an injustice.
I have not been able to give charity as I used to, as I'm trying to pay off a student loan. This really brings me down. Should I stop giving charity until it's paid off, or continue? So this kind of can be like broadened and generalized a little bit more into if a person has debts to pay off and they also would like to give charity, does the obligation of repaying those debts negate or take precedence over them giving charity? So they should really focus on their debt as opposed to giving to the needy.
So one very important point that you pick up from the sort of the message or the question is that it gets me down, and it's really about your emotions. It's not about Sharia. Right? You're used to something,
Allahu Akbar.
and sometimes, you know, we talked about this with the masjid, right? You know, the community is not coming to the masjid, but people who are coming to the masjid regularly are still being rewarded as if they were coming to the masjid, but it gets them down. So it's a matter of your attachment to sadaqah and your feeling towards it. But Allah Azza wa Jal, the rulings of Sharia are very clear. If you have a debt, then you should not be giving sadaqah unless and until you have repaid that debt. That's number one. Number two, now because there are debts that you have an agreement, you have installments to pay. If you meet those installments, then you can give sadaqah. There's no harm in that. You know, for example, a person that has a mortgage or, you know, a student loan, and they make monthly payments. As long as you're making those payments, that is your agreement with the lender. So you can give sadaqah. There's no harm. And then the amount of sadaqah is not important as the amount is not as important as the intention and the act of giving. And Rasulullah said, protect yourself from hellfire, even if it is with the piece of a date. So, you know, small amounts are not really going to, but, you know, they are small but huge in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Allahu Akbar. Quality, not quantity, right?
Exactly.
Given with ikhlas.
Intention that really matters.
Another is asking, Assalamu alaikum Shaykh. Wa alaikum salam. I don't know which Shaykh you give me salam, but I'm going to take it as both, inshallah.
There's only one Shaykh.
A quick question regarding obedience of the wife. Would it be possible to know more about why the wife has to ask her husband permission to work? Jazakallah khair. So I think this alludes to your bayan that you gave as well, about woman working, and it is because the husband is allowing her to work. That's why she's able to work. So what is the wisdom behind that? Yeah,
the reason is very simply the husband has a overall responsibility to protect and provide. Right? That is the role of the husband. Now, if a woman is going to go into is going to earn from outside of her home, right? It's different if she's earning from home, then she doesn't need permission actually. If she's working from home, if she's working providing a service or selling things or things like that, then she doesn't need to seek permission from her husband. She's free to do that. But when she leaves the home, she is under the care and responsibility of her husband, right? So in general, if the husband makes something, if he says, for example, and this is Sharia, if he asks his wife not to go to a certain place, then she has to obey that, because Allah has placed him as the carer, if you like.
Isn't there also an element of like the fact that when you're married to somebody, you become now the emir of his property and his wealth,
so
and his children.
That was coming.
Jump the gun.
Okay. So that is the first thing, is that, you know, I cannot ensure that my wife is safe outside of my home, right? And I have a responsibility to protect her. So if I ask my wife not to leave the home for a reason, and one of them would be, you know, to go out and earn a living, then I have the right to do that if I fear for my wife, the safety of my wife. That's number one. If I fear for the iman of my wife, that she will be in an environment that is not conducive for her iman, it is not appropriate, then that is another reason why I can ask of my wife not to leave home in order to work. If I am expecting, if I feel that by working my wife is not going to be available for the education of my children, or to take care of the needs of my children, this is another reason, right? It shouldn't be for just for the sake of it, but it has to have, there has to be reasoning behind, and it's important to explain that to your wife. If you make such a decision and you ask your wife not to work. It's something that Allah has given the right to the husband over the wife, but there has to have, it has to have reasoning, and you should, part of letting your wife know that you don't want this for her, you need to let her know the reasoning behind it. And it shouldn't be just the case that you don't want your wife to have any wealth, because we know that Khadija radiallahu anha wa ardaha was a businesswoman, and she was trading, but in her case people did it for her, and she did not have to go out, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it her. She had slaves and servants who carried out the work. So it's not really about not working, it's going out of the home, and going out of the home, we said there is the element of physical protection, protecting her from harm. There is, and this is perhaps the reason why Rasulullah forbade the woman to travel on her own without a mahram, because she doesn't have any physical protection, right? Ulama say if there is, if she's traveling in a safe area now, it's okay for her to travel on her own, or at least some ulama have that reasoning. So it's protection of herself, and then protection of her iman, because you're responsible as the sort of head of the family. You're responsible for the iman of your wife, for the iman of your children. So if she is you're preventing her from going to work because the environment is not good for her iman, and now the question is, well, why does a man go there in that environment, right? Why is it acceptable for a man to go in an environment where maybe there's free mixing and things like that, and there is temptation to haram? Well, because it is the duty of the man to go out and earn, right? It is
comes back to responsibilities, isn't it?
Right? If that necessity is on both, then there is no qualms and no questions raised. But if the husband feels like he can take care of the needs and he's the provider, then he has the right to sort of protect the iman of his of his wife in that way.
So in essence, it comes down to core responsibilities in the Sharia. What the Sharia gives you in terms of your responsibilities as a spouse, right? So the responsibilities that the Sharia gives for the man is obviously to provide for his spouse and his children, right? And that is an obligation. He has to do that. And if he doesn't, that is grounds for khula and divorce, right? You can request to be separated on those grounds. And the responsibilities which are an obligation for the wife is the protection of his property, of his wealth, of his children, and so on and so forth. So that is an obligation that is given or passed down by the Sharia. So there's no getting out of that. So if anything that the husband does that detriments or is a detriment to his responsibility, then hands down no. And similarly, if anything that the woman does that is detriment to her responsibility, then hands down no as well. And that's kind of like the wisdom that we're kind of getting to. Inshallah. Yeah, I think that's it. Alright, there is a following question. If a husband buys a house for his wife to stay in, does this also become her home? The short answer is yes, right?
What was that?
If a husband buys a house for his wife to stay in, does this also become her home? It's quite clear, right?
Well, if the husband buys the house, it's the house of the husband. If the wife buys the house, it's the house of the wife. If they both contribute and buy the house together, then they each in accordance to their contribution. If a husband buys a house and gifts part of that house to his wife, so he makes his wife a partner in that ownership by gifting it to her and putting her name on it, then she becomes the rightful owner of.
I see the question.
Yeah.
I was thinking of it in does it become a home, a place to stay in, or is she supposed to stay somewhere else? I don't know where I'm going with that one, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's about ownership.
Ownership.
So ultimately, whoever pays the price is the owner. But then it can be gifted, and he can give the whole house. He can give part of the house to his wife as he wishes and pleases.
Okay. Jazakallah khair for answering the question. That was really good. We got a comment. Jazakallah khair for your du'as as well. Alhamdulillah, we're glad we can be of some assistance, inshallah. Can a woman be an emir amongst a group of men? For example, on an overnight school trip. So this is I think this pertains to, so obviously this question is bound to come up because we're talking about the roles and responsibilities of the two genders, right? And obviously a bone of contention all the time is places of power and responsibility and equality within that realm. So you have to sort of divide that, isn't it, into emir. What is meant by the word emir? Now, as soon as I say the word emir, what comes to mind is umara, right, and salatin, and people who are running, like, you know, governments, and the head of state. That's what comes to mind with the word emir. But the emir is it's quite a fluid concept. You can be the emir of your household. You can be the emir amongst a group of people who are making a decision on whether to purchase a digital camera or not. You can be the emir of a group of people who are a football team, the captain of a football team, the emir. That's the emir. You can be the emir of a group of people who are traveling, for example. All of these situations and circumstances of responsibility, you can apply the word emir to. So when it becomes there's a mas'ala in the deen where the Prophet ﷺ is stated to have said that the people who grant wilaya to a woman over their affairs will never be successful, right? And I think he was saying that with regards to the Persians. I think one of their queens became the head of state there. Yeah. So he was referring to head of state particularly as opposed to any other position, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. So there's no, from that we kind of deduce that there is no objection to a woman leading a group of men or group of women or whoever.
Yeah, absolutely not.
In any circumstance other than.
A woman can lead a group of men if she is fit for that position. Then, you know, there's no questions raised. Now, running the affairs of a state is a different matter. In that, Allah. So the ultimate leader of a state should not be a woman. That is the sort of command of Rasulullah for a number of reasons that we don't want to go into. But even then, would still, if there is a necessity for a woman to be placed as the leader for a group of men, there is a need for it, then no question about it, it's permissible, it is allowed. But would you encourage it or discourage it? I would certainly discourage it, right? The reason for that is that if you are the leader, then you are the point of contact of every person. Unless you have somebody under you who's a man and he's going to deal with all matters, it's going to put you into constant contact with people. It may put you in a situation where you are not observing hijab, you are not observing the you know, you're talking in privacy, or you have to talk in privacy with a person. That is not permissible. Usually, you know, a male and female should not be alone in an area, but because you are dealing with a sensitive matter, confidential matter, you would need to be with that person on your own. So things like this, so in of itself is not something that is discouraged or haram. It is absolutely permissible. But is there an alternative? If there is an alternative, then it's better for that to be implemented. And many examples of this, that for example, sahabiyat, Ummuna Aisha radiallahu anha, and other sahabiyat were going, you know, Sahaba would go to them for advice in major political matters and expeditions and things like that. And they would go out with the army, but never made as the leader, but rather the point of sort of seeking advice and istishara and to consult with them, and that was done with the principles in place, meaning that the rulings of Sharia are implemented in relation to hijab and the respect that is due.
And one example would be MCB have got their elections coming up. We have Ajmal Masroor and I think Zara, I can't remember her surname, but she's running for the General Secretary of the MCB. And no one's going to bat an eyelid whether that's permissible or impermissible.
Exactly.
Everyone's okay with it. Everyone's fine with it. Not endorsing any of those two candidates, by the way, guys. Whoever you want to vote for, if you can vote, that is. Inshallah, you guys can make your own decisions about that. Inshallah. I think that's all from the questions. Aussie Aki Imam in the house. Assalamu alaikum. He's giving salam to his mashayikh. Assalamu alaikum. Just a friendly salam to my Imams, mashallah. And anybody else listening, mashallah, who has sent over their salams either in writing or in their hearts, we feel that in here, alhamdulillah. I think we'll call that a day, inshallah, for the questions. We've covered quite a number of topics, and I think we digressed in many of them, mashallah, to related topics as well, alhamdulillah. I hope you benefited from the discussions as I did. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. And inshallah, we hope to see you next week for another installment of Ask an Imam.